Introduce our panelists today, and I guess I'll just kind of start from my right here. For our first panelist, we have Pastor Tony Miles, and Tony is a graduate of Covenant Theological Seminary. He's a native of St. Louis. We actually grew up a few blocks from each other, and so is my road dog. And he's also one of the pastors of New City Fellowship Church, which has multiple locations here in St. Louis. He's the pastor of the 82nd Street U City campus. And then also we have my good dear friend, Freddie Sanchez right here. Freddie Chavez right here. Freddie is the executive director of Latinos en Acción, which is a nonprofit advocacy organization based right here in St. Louis. And also has a really amazing radio program called Soy de Rancho. So you can tune into that, look up for that online. And so he's going to be sharing with us. And also from Latinos en Acción, we have our friend Sonia Kumpucao, and she's also a student at St. Louis University of Public Health, and then also is the program director at Latinos en Acción. Then also to her left is my very good friend, my homie, Pastor Brent Rome. Brent's also a St. Louis native, and he has not too long ago planted the very vibrant, multi-ethnic church, U City Family Church, that meets in the Tivoli Theater in the Del Mar Loop. Brent and his wife, Rebecca, their beautiful family, they live in U City. They're deeply connected to seeing God's reconciling work happen in that community and St. Louis more broadly. And then also finally to the left, we have my good friend, Pastor Daniel Song. Pastor Daniel Song is a native of Chicago, but he made the right move and came down here for the loop. So we welcome him with open arms. And Pastor Daniel is the pastor of yet another vibrant, multi-ethnic church called Crossroads Presbyterian Church. It also has two campuses, one in Maplewood and one in Maryland Heights. And Pastor Daniel is the site pastor at the Maryland Heights campus, and also a graduate of Covenant Theological Seminary. And so we have a very good, diverse group here to continue to try to help us chew on a lot of the things that we've been talking about all day today. And so we're going to have some some guided questions right now that we've thought about and we thought were important to really speak to and address. And then after a few minutes, we're going to take some questions that you guys are writing down right now. And I'll just be kind of passing the mic. So panelists, feel free to kind of jump in. We got some mics here as you're led. And what we want to start off with is maybe a little bit, kind of an icebreaker to get us into the conversation, which is, we're talking a lot about interminority dialogue and how, and even as the wonderful spoken word just said, how we have so many resources and so many opportunities that when not pitted against each other, we can actually do a lot of great work for the kingdom and for the betterment of our communities together. So the first question is, what especially as you think about, kind of the ethnic community that you represent, and you kind of more broadly, what are some of the strengths and assets that you see in your particular community that come to bear on improving interminority dialogue? And what are some of the strengths that you see among your people, among your community that you work in, that you feel are particularly important and crucial in the work of interminority dialogue, and that really kind of are a complement and a benefit to communities outside of your own?
Well, first of all, I think as Latino community, I think it is faith. I think this is the more important, the essence that we're giving to our community. And this is what it can get us together. It's more about principles and values. That's where it starts from us on at home.
I think when I think about the African American community, I think about Dr. Ra's comments this morning, and that is the African American community, a faith forged through suffering. And so a faith that has learned what it looks like to be the people of God, and to be the people of God, particularly in a context and in a culture where we've experienced a lot of persecution, discrimination, things of that kind over many, many years, and have learned what it means to follow God in the midst of that kind of conflict and suffering. I think is one of the things that our community brings to the table, and in particular, not just going through the suffering, but learning God's sort of victory and triumph in the middle of that.
So I'm kind of, sorry. So I'm kind of representing two communities, or two ethnic communities here, because my parents actually migrated from India, and I'm not a St. Louis native, I'm sorry, but I was born in New Jersey, and I lived in Chicago suburbs, and then country, central Illinois, so very like mixed areas, and I have traveled to India a lot in my summers, and then I fell in love with the Hispanic culture, and that's why I work with Latinos en Acción now, and so I have really enjoyed kind of mixing both the Indian culture plus the Hispanic culture, and having visited like Mexico and España and both in the last couple years, having really immersed myself. I think I've seen a lot of heart being brought in from both places, and I think that's what I've mostly loved from going to the border and seeing firsthand people that are like looking for the American dream. And it's not just like as my family, like they migrated here looking for more opportunities, and I think we have this ideal where America is like the land of the brave and home of the free, and hopefully we can keep that up, but I think that's what we can strive for.
You know, I was just thinking about this week when Vince sent the questions. I grew up in St. Louis and went to Pattonville High School. Any pirates? Okay. So anyway, no pirates. But you know, my ethnic heritage, we're predominantly Irish, but we also have Cherokee ancestry. And I think for many people in my background, in my family, the sort of only option that they felt that was possible for them was total assimilation. And so, you know, so it was really only my generation, my sisters and my cousins, you know, that have actually started to reach back to try to connect with the Native American Cherokee part of our heritage. In fact, Vince, we just applied for membership in Cherokee Nation. Many of my family have already gotten their membership. And Vince was asking me if I had received my actual Cherokee card before this event, and I said, I haven't got it yet, so you have to extend the honorary black card that you gave me a while back. Just let me hold on to that for a few more weeks. Okay, cool. But I say all that to say, you know, in St. Louis anyway, it's because ethnic groups are relatively polarized, I often found myself in sort of middle grounds, like middle zones. And I remember particularly one year in high school, one of my teachers said, you know, pulled me aside and said, you know, why are you always trying to fit in with the black students? And another one of my teachers the same year literally pulled me aside after class and said, why are you always trying to pass for white? And so it's interesting because everybody needed to get you somewhere to figure out the category that worked for them. But this has helped, I think, push me into part of the reason that we have a really vibrant multi-ethnic church, I think, is because we pushed into some of these middle grounds and got to hear and be a part of conversations in different arenas. And I think that that's what our church has become. It's become a place where literally anybody who shows up, white, black, Hispanic, Asian, Native, wherever, you know, shows up and suddenly feels at home. So I think for us, it's just been sort of creating a home for people, for sort of wanderers, you know, people that have been kind of wandering and they find a home there.
As a Korean American, I think one of the things, actually, Dr. Ross and John actually hit on it as he described the story of his mother. Like the Korean church prays like no other culture and ethnicity. There is no other church where every single day they wake up at 5 in the morning and go hear a sermon and then pray for an hour before they go to their jobs. And that was something I grew up being a pastor's kid. From the time I was born, I went to church at 5 in the morning. And I remember my dad and my mom sitting right there in the front of the pew on their knees, not only praying for our family, praying for the church, praying for the world, praying for all the communist countries, like Professor Rob was saying. And that is something that is just a beautiful picture of the Korean church and how they really are on their knees 24/7 praying. My grandmother, when I finally told her that I was becoming a pastor, she was just bawling, tears upon tears. The house was flooded because she had been praying since I was in the womb that I would become a pastor. And just stories like that that really epitomize the Korean culture of a church that is praying. And something that I've learned to appreciate in the midst of my own growing up theologically and figuring out where's the balance between that. It's been something that I've really appreciated. That I'm slowly losing as a second-gen Korean American and being much more comfortable going along with some of the suffering. There was a deep desire to meet the Lord and find peace in the midst of being on our knees. So something that I have grown up really appreciating.
And it's amazing too how in Christ that we're all brought together, right? That there is no Jew or Gentile. And of course, what Paul means there is not that our distinctiveness fades away or that it doesn't matter, because also later in the New Testament we see in Revelation 7:9 that ethnic distinction is eternal, that even in heaven that there's different tribes and different languages. But what's meant there is that there's no respecter of persons, that we're all equal in God's sight, we're all unified and one, and that even across all different lines. So even me and my brother Brent, even though he went to Pattonville, and I went to Rittner, and so from the worldly standpoint, we're enemies, but in Christ we are unified, brother. See, those of you guys are from St. Louis, look up Rittner Pattonville. But it is interesting how kind of the various layers that can divide us are so multifaceted. And so I guess what the next question is, we want to really kind of name some of the hard places, because we all have so many assets and so many strengths that we bring, and even these leaders here today, this marvelous team right here, are involved in so many different points of interminority dialogue. And I think all of us, we talked about it during the workshops, and there's some things that have been named. We want to name them some more and think specifically about, again, the communities that we're representing, and what are some of the challenges and what are some of the weaknesses in engaging interminority dialogue that we've seen in our own communities, that is really, kind of in the communities that we're working in here and the ones that we represent. What are some of the challenges you've seen? What are some of the things that have been problematic that has actually hindered interminority fellowship and cooperation?
So your greatest strength sometimes can also be your greatest weakness. So I remember talking to one of the prominent African American pastors here in our city. I'm in a church that is extremely multi-ethnic, a lot of different people from a lot of different places. And so we were sitting with this pastor, this African American pastor of this prominent black church, and he said to us, he said, man, one of the things I appreciate about your church is how involved you are in reaching out to the nations around you, just how well you guys do at reaching the nations. And he said, I would love it if our church was doing that. But he said, one of the things I have discovered about the black church, this pastor said, is that we really focus on our own stuff. We don't really reach outside of ourselves because we're too busy focusing on our own pain, our own struggle, our own suffering, our own sort of brokenness, that we don't do a lot of reaching outside of ourselves. And that's unfortunate to me, because I think the African American church has a lot to offer to the rest of the church that doesn't get expressed in the depth that it could if we were actually doing more of that. And so I was trying to think in my head actually of black churches that I know that have ministries that are reaching out to non-African Americans. And I couldn't think of, with the exception of Jubilee, I couldn't think of another church in my city where reaching out to other people groups was kind of a major focus of the church. So I think that's a weakness that we have, that we don't reach outside of ourselves.
and I'm stepping up my moderator hat just for a second because I can't help but chime in a little bit. But especially when we think about the fact that the first missionary from the United States of America was an African American named George Liele, who went, before Adoniram Judson, before a lot of the earlier missionaries that we usually learn about, the white missionaries from overseas, he was actually an African American, the first one. So it's just, it kind of adds more depth to what you're saying.
Yeah, well, it's pretty much like you're saying, it's about the church, like our Latino community, as for the Latino community, because our Latino community pretty much is in a bubble, trying to keep themselves in the shadows, So that's why our challenge is to go in the churches where they're hiding in the bubble. And this is our challenge to go and find our Latino community because that's where they feel safe. And that's our biggest challenge, to get them out of that comfort zone, because when you get in that comfort zone, that I'm here, I'm safe, I'm okay, forgetting about what really is going on out there, or not, they don't want to worry about it because this, for them, is trouble. As for them, is to be deported, being separated. So that's our bigger challenge, pretty much, and to do something like this, to have from different races, different cultures. That's pretty much our biggest challenge, to get our own people from that comfort zone, to get out there and be heard.
I don't know how many times I've gotten the question, just like randomly in a parking lot or walking through, like, hey, what race are you, or like, what's your ethnicity? And like, just by looking, especially as I work with Hispanic people, there's like some assumptions that, I can feel good because I can speak Spanish, and I'm pretty proud of that. And I can speak Malayalam too, which is an Indian language. So I think just starting off, like, that's one big thing, is that right when you come up to start off with, I feel like in the beginning we have a problem of just like trying to assume things off the bat. So just like, and something like you, like, as the only female here, I feel like I should represent, go woman. So just as a female minority, I think there's always that stereotype that maybe I don't speak English, or I only speak Hindi, or I'm not Catholic. So I think people, there's a lot of problems with just assuming. So I think it's been great to try to spread, like, oh yeah, my parents are Catholic. Like, no, there's a lot of different religions in India. Like, I don't worship meat, or I eat meat a lot. So just like in the beginning, I'm from Central Illinois. I was the only brown person in my school. So it was definitely great being welcomed into St. Louis and seeing so much variety and realizing that there's so much different culture, and just like being welcomed to this beautiful city. But also realizing that there's also, like, people do group with people that are like with, and it's also not just because, oh, you look like me, but also because, like, sometimes with the language barrier, that's we're comfortable, because I don't know if any of you guys speak Malayalam. Yeah? No. Okay. So it's not like it's when my grandma comes and visits, I feel bad because she doesn't want to leave home as much, or she feels awkward in like any like her sari or anything going outside because she feels like people are looking at her. Sorry. But just going outside, I think there's a difference between like staring and noticing, but then people like delve in deeper, and I think we have to like, it's important to notice the differences, and they're there, so just like embracing them and being able to mix all the cultures together. So I don't know if I answered the question, but something like that.
I found that in a multi-ethnic church, when a social issue arises, that could potentially be divisive, sometimes it's hard to know exactly what to preach, because you've got 2 or 3 or 4 different groups, all of whom probably need to hear something slightly different in that moment to address whatever biases or expectations or assumptions that the different groups are making. So I just remember, and so that I think is a weakness in the sense that in like a black church or a Hispanic church or whatever, where you do get to work on your stuff, when you're in a group that is so multi-ethnic, sometimes it's hard to work on your stuff because the stuff is so different for the different folks. So, for instance, when Mike Brown was killed, And at our church, it was challenging to preach there because I felt like if I were in, Clayton or Ladue or Chesterfield, I'd know exactly what I should preach on those Sundays. And if I was in the city at an all-black church, I feel like I'd know what to preach there also. But in a church where there's white, black, Hispanic, Native, Asian, and all different socioeconomic levels too, all different levels of education, religious and non-religious backgrounds. It was like, all right, how can we dive in deep on some of this stuff and begin to address some of the things that I know are in the hearts of the different people there when there are so many different kinds of people represented. So I think that is a challenge in a multi-ethnic setting, is to be able to go deep with different people on different things, different issues that they have. When I preached on the Good Samaritan last Sunday, rather than say Samaritan when I was reading the passage, I literally went down the list from, atheist to Muslim to born-again Christian to Hillary supporter to Trump supporter to Ferguson police officer to Black Lives Matter protester, because I know that for somebody in our congregation, that's the other, so anyway, I think there's great strength in that, but there's also the challenge of being able to push deep into the stuff that needs to be addressed.
Personally, for me, there's always generalizations, and I have to generalize when I speak for the Asian community, but I can share at least part of my story of where I feel like the Asian American community needs to grow in and address is just listening to the stories of other minority groups. Being an Asian American, I grew up in a home where they immigrated from Korea, sacrificed all these things, good jobs, security, power, influence, all of that, so that we, as children, might have a successful story, get a good job, support my parents as they get older. And so the important thing that was ingrained in me was you need to assimilate into white culture. And you needed to do that. And I remember my mom telling me, you need to become like that white Christian boy. Except he had the magazines that I shouldn't be reading, And yet the narrative was, be like the white person because they're the ones that are successful and you need to become like them. And so my two favorite shows growing up were two black family shows. Cosby Show and Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. And anytime my dad came home and saw me watching the Cosby Show, he'd be like, silence. It was fine. Why? Because it was a successful doctor who assimilated into white culture. Anytime he saw me later in the night watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, he would yell, tell me to turn that TV off because it was a bad influence. And so there's this narrative that I grew up as a child, even through my teen, high school, college years, that told me that being black, Latino, any other minority race was bad because they're lazy, they don't work hard, but the white person was successful. And so as I started reflecting on that throughout these past years, especially these past 2 years, and I challenged our congregation, especially to the Asian Americans in our church, was you need to listen to your own narratives, know what your own narrative is of the black community specifically, and see what kind of racial biases that you have. There would be times when we'd be in Chicago, we'd be driving down. I was raised in Chicago. We're in the nice area of town, and we keep going down Milwaukee or Western, and soon you hit an area. This is like light of day, midday. You'd see some African Americans around, and I'd have buddies say, "Ooh, our door's locked." And there's this narrative that we have adopted to say minorities are X, Y, and Z, and that's why we shouldn't be like them, and we should look down on them. and feel superior about our race because we worked hard. We've only been here for a couple of decades, and we've gone so much further than African Americans have. And it's this implicit bias and narrative that we've adopted that is so antithetical to the gospel. And it was good to hear our brother Aaron speak in our workshop, saying that we need to see one another made in the image of God. And for the Asian American community, we have really forsaken that and seen white people as being made in the image of God and everyone else sub. And that's something I feel like we really need to repent about and really begin to hear and listen and create space to listen to these stories, because that's the only way we will break those barriers of hostility in the Asian community until we begin to listen to the African American community, the Latino, Hispanic, Native American. And until we do that, we will continue to teach our children the same narrative that our parents gave to us. And I'm not blaming on them, obviously it's the heart, but yet there's this generational narrative that is being told, and until we begin to create space and have things like this, I'm afraid that we're going to continue to pass that down from generation to generation.
That's pretty much, I'm sorry, that's pretty much because you say it's come from home. And it come from home and saying how you show those principles and values to your kids to bring it out as they grow up, because you know they should come from their heart, bring their heart as being one, because we all one, except that we're out there. The kids, they don't want to speak English because bullying in school, because you know all that discrimination in school. So you know they say, okay, I got only English, no Spanish, or no Chinese. You know, so that comes from home. So we're gonna encourage that to our kids.
Yeah. And so
Vince, I just have the lyrics from Parents Just Don't Understand rolling through my mind right now. I almost busted out.
we got a Will Smith theme going. So I just wanted to ask one more question to our panels, and then maybe if we could have some of the cards brought up, and we can also have some of the audience questions. But you know, St. Louis is a funny place. You know, it's an interesting city we live in here, and I like that we have a good diversity in so many ways. But also another way we have a lot of good diversity here today is we have a good mix of people who are from St. Louis, people who are not from St. Louis. Even in the panel here, we have people here today who have come here from other countries. Some fleeing disastrous situations, others looking for a better vocational situation and a way to provide for their families. We have people who have moved here from other parts of the country and come here for jobs or for school or for whatever else. And we have people who are from here. We have people who are from here and moved away for a long time and then came back. And so I know, you know, Brent and I have that same kind of story. And so we have various perspectives, and we live in a very unique city. And this whole conversation is something that, especially about interminority dialogue, especially in St. Louis, that we have a really local focus here today on how we in our city can really move forward. Because as we were talking earlier, we live in a very unique city. It's extremely racially divided, has a long history. I mean, even the foundation of our state was predicated upon the continuance of slavery. And so we have a spiritual residue of you know, and even our name, Mound City, comes from the Native American mounds that were literally bulldozed to make way for the city of St. Louis and development. So our city is built on the seeds of racism and colonialism. And then to the point now where we have this extreme racial divide on Del Mar, and now and again in 2000, we've become this huge site for refugee resettlement, and our immigrant population has been growing, and so we have lots of, we're talking about challenges and opportunities here. And so focusing specifically on St. Louis, and I kind of just briefly touched on it right there, but what would you guys say would be some of the unique challenges? Because again, a lot of us have a lot of experience in other places, and as we probably already know, these dynamics look different here than they do in other places. And so what are the unique challenges and opportunities in St. Louis in particular to building interminority dialogue? What are some of the unique challenges that St. Louis represents that a Los Angeles or a New York or a Chicago or an Atlanta maybe would look differently? And then also, what are some of the unique opportunities? What are some of the unique strengths that we have here in our city that we can leverage for building bridges between different minority communities?
Growing growing up in St. Louis, one thing that, and I've lived in Phoenix and Los Angeles and just different, and overseas and different places. I've always felt like St. Louis, the tension between folks from different races in St. Louis is more palpable for me than anywhere else I've ever been in the country. And part of that, I think, is, as you put it, Vince, so much of the history of St. Louis, has race layered into it. But it's even, it's so deeply layered that people have learned to speak in code and to communicate in code. And just growing up, hearing coded racism, sort of, that's deniable, right? So like, I didn't say the thing that you thought that I said, which if I had said would be racist. I said this, which is a signal to my racist friends that you know what I mean. But so I think that the fact that it's, in a way that it's not as, it's sort of gotten, it's sort of, since Michael Brown's killing it, it sort of reopened it. But I think when I was growing up, I just remember it being very layered, very coded, very submerged, but very present. And I think that made it very difficult because people weren't not speaking honestly with one another. They weren't saying the things that they really thought and felt. They were ignoring one another, talking past each other.
So, coming to St. Louis, I think for looking at the opportunity side, I think one of the best things that I've seen is the different festivals and celebrations of culture that we have here. Like just last week, it was Hispanic Heritage Month, or the weekend we had in Soulard, and then this summer there was the Greek Festival, and just seeing all of these different cultures, I think, has been really great because especially in Danville, Illinois, which is half an hour east of Champaign, predominantly white country, not much culture going on in like different and variant sense. So just having that we have access to it here, and then it's all like St. Louis has that nice quality of it all being in the vicinity. We kind of have a metro and buses and access that we can all use. So just having these neighbors right here in the same city, I think is a really good opportunity for us to come together and go outside of our bubble or what we're used to, and be able to go and experience different cultures one-on-one and really get hands-on or listen to other people's struggles, just like with the Bosnian refugees or with anyone else that's coming to St. Louis, and be welcome but also hear a different perspective. So I think it's really a good opportunity here in St. Louis and what we have here for kids.
So one of the great things about St. Louis, and you may have heard this, but I think St. Louis is second in terms of relocation of refugees in our country. So that means that when refugees come to the United States, this is the second leading place that they come to. And that makes it makes for an incredible display of diversity and culture in St. Louis. So you have all these different people groups from all of these different places in our city, which is pretty incredible and not true of every city across our nation. And so we should actually celebrate that and be thankful to God that He's given us that blessing of being a city that has all these people from all these different cultures. This is probably not uniquely problematic about St. Louis, but it is one of the things that I encounter a lot, and that is an aversion to history. We don't like to know our stuff. If I ask you, for instance, where Harriet Scott is buried, you know who Harriet Scott is? So Harriet Scott is the wife of Dred Scott. If I asked you where she was buried, would you know? Like some of you would, some of you are looking at me because you have absolutely no idea, right? If I asked you if you knew that this was the Mound City and that history of sort of Native American sort of culture in this area, would you know that? We don't like our history. We don't like to know it. We don't really like to get really deep into it. And that's probably true about American culture in general, but it's definitely true about our city. We don't like to talk about, deal with the reality of our history and the brokenness that exists sort of in our city. Now, our city obviously was the place where the Dred Scott case was tried and decided. By the way, if you've never read the decision of the United States Supreme Court as it relates to the Dred Scott decision, you should read it. You should know that that's a part of your history, and it's a part of St. Louis history in particular. If you don't know where Harriet Scott's buried, by the way, I'm not chiding you because I didn't know where she was buried. And she's actually buried 5 minutes from where I live. So not Hilltown, actually Hillsdale, in a little cemetery there on St. Louis Avenue. I mean, these are all sort of things that we probably should know about. And there's tons of other things I could say about the city of St. Louis in terms of historical reality of race and those issues that we don't know, we don't talk about, we don't like to really get into it because it's hard and it's dark, and we don't like to go to those kinds of places. And that's unfortunate because actually the gospel frees us to go to deep, dark places of brokenness and announce the good news of God's salvation that has come in Jesus Christ to heal all of those areas of brokenness. But we have a tendency of sweeping those things under the carpet, submerging them, and not dealing with them. So.
Yeah, and you know, the thing is, like you're saying, some things that like history that we don't know much, but like St. Louis is like, it's a sister city with Mexico, with St. Louis Potosí. You know, and it's in Potosí over here in St. Louis too. And a lot of people don't want to hear this. We don't bring the Mexican stuff. Like, you know, like, but no, there's a thing. There's things, history that we, like I said, we didn't cross the border crossed us as Latinos, you know. So there's a lot of history going on even in St. Louis, but then again, yeah, it's a great city. I mean, I've been here, like I said, I came here crawling, and they asked me, well, like a baby, you know, under the fence, you know, so I'm documented too. I crossed the river, I used to cross the river since I was a kid, since I remember going to go trick-or-treating. So, I mean, I knew the KKK since kid. I saw all this stuff in the border, and I come here, I mean, I thought it was like, well, in the beginning, it's a great city. I feel like, you know, I can film here, you know. But then later on, this comments later on, I wasn't just like, because of my skin, we identified as skin, I wasn't identified as Latino. I was like a Cambodian or Cuban, you know, a lot of people would stop me and thought I was there, not Mexican. But I mean, it's a great city. I said, you know, I just started here believing that, all right, I'm from here. You know, I came on vacation, and I'm still here. You know, so there's something that's great. But then again, as the years come and you can see like we live in a real discrimination, city and racist because of our color skin, because of like the language. You know, so there is a lot of that. There's a lot of work to do still. But then, you know, like here, there's a good turnout because I feel like the greatest that I make even today that I can feel that we're not alone. You know, there is different people, different human beings that they really care for others. As Latino, we feel like that because we come to the city. Like I said, we live in the shadows because if we see the African American, we feel like, you know, they're like this. And we all like bumping heads instead of knowing each other and creating those barriers, those walls that Trump talking about, that those walls are already existing on our eyes, on us. So we can blame Trump talking about the wall and all that. There's already walls on the whole border of Mexico. So, you know, he's talking about maybe wasting money because borders, they're already there. He's creating borders on us. And it's working because that's what we're talking about, hate. And, you know, discrimination in each other. Just because we want people that, you know, just because I got power, I can say that. But I think the most powerful thing is it's going to be our hearts. We can break those walls and create that unity that we need to create, that to make a good change on all of us, not Latinos and every human being that we're here. Because my belief is, you know, I'm maybe the only crazy one things, but we all need one. We are one, and that's how the Creator made us. You know, so He is made about living that ourselves and bring it out there for the other ones.
All right. Well, maybe we we don't have too much more time, but maybe in order to get at least a couple of these audience questions in, maybe if just one or two of you kind of want to field one of these, and then maybe we can try to get to another one. And so, so this is, I think it's a really a question I want to answer to. As a really good question that I think a lot of people of color deal with a lot of times in engaging reconciliation, which is how do you balance lots of stuff? I'm trying to start as I was reading. So bridge building across ethnic communities is difficult and tiring. How do you guard yourself from exhaustion and even growing in anger towards the majority culture and other minorities?
You need a lot of Holy Spirit, a lot of prayer. I'm actually being serious. You need the Holy Spirit of God. You need a lot of prayer. You also need a biblical conviction that this is what God calls us to as His people. If it's just about you and your work and your efforts and what you're doing, you're going to burn out very, very quickly in the conversation. But if you're convinced that biblically this is what God is calling us to as His people, if you're convinced that the Spirit of God is in you to empower you for that purpose, and if you spend a lot of time in prayer, the Lord will give you what you need. You also need time within your own communities to dialogue and conversate and vent and share your struggles and pray for one another. So one of the things I'm always grateful for is the privilege to be at things like this where I'm around brothers and sisters who are like me. I can have those kinds of conversations and vent and pray and be encouraged and strengthened. So I love the LDR, which is another conference for that purpose, because it gives me an opportunity to be around people like myself and be able to dialogue and vent and hear God's encouragement in that way. And when I'm on vacation, actually, from time to time, I will go attend the Black church for that very purpose. Again, to be encouraged, to be strengthened, to be around people who are like me, who look like me, and just be encouraged in that way. So you need time where you can actually go and be rejuvenated and re-encouraged within your own community as well, because this is hard work, but it's work that God has called us to do.
I think you also need an open heart instead of approaching it as a job or like a duty, which is also good, but more as like an opportunity and something that we can do. And it's, I mean, like instead of looking more like, oh, I gotta go talk to that person, like I get to talk to that person, like I get to talk to them, I get to go learn more, I get to open my eyes to all these different opportunities. So just because I'm not a pastor or anything like that, so I don't have holy voices like they do. I mean, I have something hopefully in me, but we're not the same. So I think how I approach it is just the opportunity to learn more and get to know more, or get to know it. And if I do like approach like a wall or something, and like not just a physical barrier, maybe like a mental barrier, like make it a challenge for myself to try to climb over that. Like maybe it's a couple ropes, or like climb on someone's back, or I don't know, just really work together instead of seeing it as a battle, like see it as an opportunity and a good challenge.
And maybe just real quick, if especially if Pastor Brent or Pastor Dan, if you want to speak to this, it's a related question, which is, what does it look like? It's really similar, actually, kind of a follow-up to that question that someone else asked, which is, what does it look like to have safe space as a minority? You know, there's this idea of, you know, how do we balance having that kind of safe space, which I have to just give like 10 amens to what you just said about finding your own space, you know, and unapologetically doing that, like not feeling bad to say, you know what, like there's, I mean, I remember when I was in Suncheon and we were in our church, and we were in a multi-ethnic church, but there was a Korean small group in the church, and they had their kind of space to have, just be Korean and eat Korean barbecue and watch listen to K-pop, watch some soap operas, and just be Korean and not have to explain it to Chinese people or white people or black people. And I was just like, amen, do your thing. I'm not even trying to interrupt your Korean small group. And like, cause that's a good thing. We should not apologize for that, ever. But anyway, how do you create safe space? But again, we also do need to we're one body, and so how do we balance making, creating those kinds of safe spaces, and even how do we define safe space, and then how do we also walk that balance of, having that kind of, that nurturing time, but then also not staying in the bubble, like Brother Fred was talking about, but engaging the dominant culture, engaging other minorities. And so what does that look like?
I would say in one word, stories. Putting folks in a room and creating an opportunity for different people to express their experiences and describe their stories has been such a useful tool for us. And because if I'm listening to someone's story and I'm hearing the authenticity in their voice and the emotion in their voice around their story, that is going to affect my views, that's going to affect my view of them, that's going to affect my views about issues. And so I have strongly encouraged, and it's something that we've taken up, but I've also strongly encouraged other pastors, especially as they're navigating multi-ethnic issues and creating safe spaces, to, number one, limit the number. Number two, don't try to lead it and take charge. And number three, create an opportunity for people to share their personal stories. Not their political platforms, not their personal opinions, but their story and the experiences that they've had. And then you get to understand how they arrived at the conclusions they arrived at based upon their experiences.
I'd be like Brendan, say one word: fellowship, along with stories. Our church is 50-50 down the middle, white and Asian American. But we're all professionals, so you talk about socioeconomic status, and we're all mid to upper income level homes. And one of the things that we've done intentionally but organically, without any agenda, like this is amazing to have an organized space to talk specifically about different topics. One of the greatest things, and I know some of you are in here, June, Vince, others, it's been the fellowship that we've had with Jubilee. And to just get together in Vince's home and just shoot the breeze, play games, eat pizza, watch movies, and just talk in a safe place where there is no agenda, but we're just getting to know one another. Sometimes stories are shared, sometimes laughter is shared, but it's a place where we just share life together. And that has been probably the best thing for our church, to be able to allow stories to happen and allow other things to happen on its own, as we really desire to push the envelope and what it means to think about the other in our community.
Amen. I think that's so powerful. I was like so excited when one of our speakers this morning, some of you who were in the workshop on Native American theology and history, and Galen Britz, a good friend of mine, Cherokee Nation Lutheran Ministries, and me and some of the team, we were checking in with the speakers, like, oh, do you need a PowerPoint? Do you need a laptop? And he was like, I never use laptop. I never use PowerPoint ever. I'm against it. And I was like, oh, okay. And then he was like, Native Americans, we're about stories. That's how we communicate. That's how we talk. That's how we understand. That's how we relate, is through stories. And it's like, so why can't, if the imagination itself isn't enough, then, that's all there is. And so I was like, man, that is so IMD right there. I love it.
And this is what you can invite to a Latino fiesta. That's why we get there early and we never leave. So, because we have so many stories to tell, and what you say, because it's hard to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And because you can criticize and tell people, but you don't know really his story. You don't know really why he really is here and why he's here too. So yeah, definitely the testimonies are more strong in the Latino community, because like I say, every head and everyone, we got different story and why we're really here. And that's there.
I have to tell the story about the transition into our next thing for the evening as we close out. But Vince decided to put together this pastors group, all African American pastors in the city, and one honorary black guy. And so we get together once a month on a Monday night, and we pick different things to do. We just kind of hang out together and chat. So we were at the Cheesecake Factory this last couple times back. And man, we were talking, we were laughing, we were loud. So that's a stereotype by the way. And I mean, we didn't care who was listening, who was here. We were talking back and forth and, bantering back and forth. And it was amazing, it was great. But at one point, one of the brothers was like, man, we gotta go. We're too loud, man, everybody listen to what we're saying. But it was.
And it's all brothers too.
And it was so, it was so awesome though, because in that, and we're all different. I mean, I'm in the PCA, Vince is part of Jubilee Evangelical Free, and we had a non-denominational, I mean, we're all sort of different denominations, all that kind of stuff, but I love that, because it is a safe space and a space where we're just sharing life together, and it's a really cool opportunity to see that happen. So yeah, as much as you can create those kinds of spaces, the better.
So, so thank you. Can we have a round of applause for the panel, please? Please, guys, get these people's numbers, get contact info, get each other's. That's really what this is about. The hope is that out of this, that more fellowships and more cross-cultural church partnerships can happen. That's really the ultimate goal here in our city. And so, I mean, how many people even before they came to this conference knew that there was an Arabic Baptist church in St. Louis, right? Or that there's 3 Nepali Bhutanese churches. Like, I mean, we don't, that there's actually a Bhutanese Association of St. Louis, that there's a Hispanic Pastoral Alliance. So, I mean, hopefully, that's the real thing here, is to really connect across lines. And so, definitely do that. We're gonna transition right now, I'd like to invite everybody, as the worship band comes up and sets up, I'd like to invite everybody actually just to, even just take a moment of silence and really just kind of seek the Lord, and let's recenter our hearts around what God is calling us to do. Whatever those next steps might be, those partnerships, those opportunities to leverage the strengths we have, to lament the challenges in our communities, in our city, but then also to really seek God's face. So I just want to invite everybody with eyes closed and heads bowed to really just let's spend a moment of prayer and really just kind of be seeking the Lord about what He's calling, how He's calling us to further engage in this work.